Hello everyone. Hopefully all of you have had a good week this past week. In case you hadn't heard this yet, we are back in action here at Bartlettsville. We would love to have you if you haven't began to attend anywhere yet. We're open for business, as they say. We have taken a lot of precautions for your health and for your safety. If you have any concerns about that, contact me or someone on the board with those concerns. So we're going to be transitioning away a little bit from like the couple of holiday sermons that we had, transitioning away from the study we were doing in 1 Corinthians, and now we're going to go back to the Old Testament. We're going to look at a few different things there. Most specifically, we're going to be looking at a book called Ecclesiastes. If you haven't studied the book of Ecclesiastes, wonderful book. Of course, I'm going to say that about all the books, but wonderful book. It's one that I think everyone should do a deep dive on, and that is why we're going to have a sermon series based upon it. So we're going to start out with, of course, chapter 1. And this series is going to be called Life's Pursuits. Life's Pursuits. And whether or not you realize it, all of us, every single one of us, we are searching for what is going to satisfy, going to fulfill the needs and the wants of our hearts. We're all looking to that secret ingredient. We're trying to find that panacea, the cure for everything in terms of our happiness. What brings us the most contentment, what makes us feel the best in any and every circumstance. That's what we're all after. That's what we're looking for. We're trying to find the one-all be-all. And that's pretty much what Solomon was after in this book. And he begins Ecclesiastes kind of detailing, discussing how he arrived at this point. So, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, I'm going to start with verse 2. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What a rave review, right? What a way to start off a book of the Bible. It's all meaningless. I can't deal with it. Everything is meaningless. It is all useless. I've got no purpose for it. Solomon was a very rich man, a very wise man. If you're not familiar with his story, he was an astute observer of human life, and he had all this time on his hands. And did I mention that he had a lot of money? That was something that was well known about King Solomon. But still yet, he was acutely aware of all of the difficulties in life. He understood the fallen nature of man, what it meant to be human, of course, and the intricacies of life, of its complexities. We learn from him that there's nothing in and of itself that can make us content, because he says everything is meaningless. We see that in his introductory sentence in the very beginning of chapter 1. No thing, no possession, no relationship here in this life will endure to continually yield this fruit of contentment, of delight, of constant happiness. That doesn't exist. There is nothing in or of this world that will lead to that sort of everyday happiness. Continuing on with verse 3 there. What do people gain from all their labors, at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and it turns to the north, and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, and yet the sea is never full. To the place the stream comes from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Wow, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one getting this vibe, but he seems pretty down about this whole thing called life, right? He's saying, well, all this stuff, it's always happening and nothing ever changes. And there's always these ebbs and flows, but there's no excitement. Now, I'm turning to you children of the 70s and the 80s. So correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you 70s and 80s kids, the verses here really remind me of like that quintessential heartbreak song. You know, the one that the band releases after it has one of its greatest love songs. One of the members of the band has just met the love of their life, and there's just, ooh, all this ooey gooey feeling. And then this is the song they write after they break up. This is the heartbreak of when the love of your life decides that they are not, or you are not, rather, the love of their life. Kind of has that angst to it. That Solomon is just like, ugh, I'm heartbroken. I thought I had it all, but in fact, I have nothing. Moral of the story is this. Solomon felt as though there should be more to life, that there is something that he is lacking, that there is this void that he has within himself that needs to be sated. So Solomon begins this great pursuit. In chapter 2, which is where we're going to spend most of our time today, in chapter 2, we see that Solomon is beginning to detail this search. He goes on to talk about the various ways in which men and women have sought to do these sort of things throughout the ages, through means of contentment, through means of enjoyment, and delight in things of this life. And the first way that he details is one that is very popular today, and it always has been. Philosophers call this notion hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure. I think all of us kind of instinctually feel that if we just find enough things that make us happy, if we just do enough things that we like to do, everything will be all right. So that is what Solomon, he refers to himself as the teacher, occasionally as the searcher. That's what he takes up to see if this is what he should be doing with his life. So starting with chapter 2, we're going to read verse 1. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their life. Have you ever asked yourself, have you ever thought, what is the best way for me to live while I am on this earth? What would make me happy? What do I want to do for a living? What do you want to be when you grow up? My mom used to say, I'm not going to tell you guys how old my mom is because she would kill me first and foremost. But my mom used to always say, I haven't decided what I'm going to do when I grow up. And this is something she would say after all of her sons have graduated from high school, if that gives you any inclination as to the stage in life that she was in. But what are you going to do with your life? What do you think is going to make you the most content, the most happy? Have you been at this point before? Now, there's a lot implied in the paragraph that we just shared in. It talks about the different activities that Solomon was involved in. And can you imagine how much fun they must have had? Solomon, with all of his riches, gave of himself fully to the pursuit of pleasure. He would have spent, weeks, months, years, maybe, of his life in pursuit of this. And he goes on to detail that experience. He says, the first thing, Solomon, today's a you day. You need to enjoy yourself. So go have a party. Go laugh. Go enjoy yourself. Fill yourself with wine. And you guys, I don't have to continue on with this thought process. You fill in the gaps here. But the palace, I'm sure, would have just been rocking every night. They would have had the stand-up comedians. They would have had all these lavish festivals, and regardless, because those things, the comedians might have been a little nonsensical, but regardless of that, it says here that the wine was plentiful. It was flowing like water. And he says, laughter, surely that's the answer. If I'm having a good time and I'm laughing, that's great, right? That will make me feel good on the inside. But no, he said, laughter is madness. Laughter is madness. Now, I wonder if you guys haven't experienced this to some degree. Have you ever had a day where all you did seemingly was laugh, but at the end of the day, you don't remember any of it? None of it has brought you lasting peace or contentment. A lot of the stories that might have been shared on that day would have been full of exaggeration. They might have been embellished a little bit. They might have put yourself in the best light. I don't know. I don't know what it is that you laugh about. I know that I'm guilty about laughing about jokes that are a little crude at times. And those don't necessarily make me feel, real great at the end of the day when I think about such things. But what Solomon is saying here is that laughter isn't it. It's not the answer to this question. He's not saying that laughter is bad necessarily. Things in life have their places, but if you're expecting laughter to be that one-all be-all, the thing that fits all, that's not it. Laughter only deals with the peripheries of life. There's no solid food. There's no contentment within it. Ecclesiastes 7, which we'll get to in later weeks, but 7:6 says, like the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of fools. This too is meaningless. Laughter is a crackling noise. That's it. There's no fulfillment there. It leaves you unfulfilled. He's not saying it's wrong. The Bible doesn't say that it in and of itself is wrong. It's just saying that it's empty. It doesn't satisfy. Solomon says, what use is it? Where is the contentment here? He essentially says this isn't the answer. So he turns to wine. Wine is the next thing mentioned in those 3 verses. He says, surely wine has got to be it. To us today, sure, alcohol, it seems like that's the answer for a lot of people. But it's not the right one. This isn't saying that you can't have a glass of wine every now and again. This isn't saying you can't crack a cold one once in a while. What this is saying is you will not find your sole purpose in the bottom of a bottle. That's not what Solomon is saying here. It's just meaningless. I looked into what he said. I tried that too. But all it left me with was this awful, awful sense of loneliness. So he moves on. He goes on to verse 4 and he says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. So he launches himself headlong into the fruits of his labors. He's just working. He's working like a madman. These things are good, having projects, having parks, having pools to go and swim in. All the niceties that we have in life, especially in these really, really hot summers, there's very few things that are greater to go and to jump in a nice, cool pool. But he goes about trying to find satisfaction this way. He says there's pleasure, there is delight in making something myself, to doing my own work. And guys especially, we are so caught up in this. We overwork. We tend to throw ourselves into it so we don't have to deal with the rest of life. We get such a sense of accomplishment when we do things ourselves. We just launch ourselves headlong into the fray of our labors. And doing this, fully investing in this, kind of means that we can forget about what's going on inside the house. If you're working out in the garage or in the field or on the farm or wherever it is that you work, maybe it's at your job. Maybe you take up extra shifts. Maybe it's this or it's that. But regardless of what it is, this work has replaced your desire for relationships. Your wife suffers. Your kids suffer. Ladies, maybe you struggle with this. The same applies. Your husband doesn't see you. Their kids need their mother. And the family begins to fracture. Sure, there are times where you can find solace in work. You can be comforted in the fact that you can just check out for a while and focus on the task at hand. But that can't be the only thing. It can't be what you're living for. It's said of history that Nero, he was an emperor in Rome, that he found Rome a city of bricks, and then he left it a city of marble. But history tells us that he did not do this just for the beautification of Rome. He did this for his own gratification and his own vain glory. So this is what Solomon was doing. This is what he was giving himself to. His own house took like 14 years to build. He built all this stuff for his various wives, and he was just shelling out the cash to do this. Solomon next goes on to a summary of things in which today we could refer to as, living the good life. That's what he moves on to. Verse 7, I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself, the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delight of a man's heart. This is living the good life. Does that not sound modern? He had people that would just carry out his every whim. He had ranches. He had these vast farms that would provide diversion, it would provide profit, it provided status and esteem. Bank accounts kind of have this way of giving this false sense of security. Solomon said he gathered gold and silver and the treasures of kings and provinces, and he brought it all to Jerusalem, to his bank. He had all the money he could ever ask for. Then he brought in the musicians, the men and the lady singers and the bands, and they would have just been rocking. But last, and to Solomon most certainly not least, he brings in the concubines. Solomon calls them a man's delight. All of the joys of untrammeled sexuality were available to him at all times. Any lust of the flesh that he might have had was always within reach. Does this sound familiar? Does this not sound as though it's happening in 2020? I think that this really illustrates just how wrong some people are who say that the playboy mentality is peculiar to the 21st century alone. That problem has plagued mankind since the beginning. The world is constantly throwing this garbage in our faces, reducing what God called to be a blessing between a man and his wife, and the world is just trying to turn it into this cheap, transactional matter so that we can just indulge our sinful natures and have immediate gratification. All of that is a perversion of God's glory, of something that He had designed for us specifically to be good, within the confines of what it was created to be. This stuff isn't new, guys. Solomon said, I tried it all, and it's all meaningless. He goes on to verse 9. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor. And this was the reward for all of my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and all that I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Super honest. Accurate reporting. He says, there were some good things initially maybe, but at the end of the day, it amounted to nothing. Sure, I gained some notoriety in the beginning, but my wisdom was there the whole time, and I could look outside of myself, and I could see how wrong all of this was. I could make the assessment. I could say to myself, maybe, but not really. Maybe this will do it. But it won't. He says, his conclusion was, it's not worth it. Like a candle, it just burned away, leaving me just a pile of ash. None of it could satisfy me after that. He calls it emptiness, striving after the wind. He was burnt out. He goes on to say in verse 12, then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom, and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? He said, I've done it. I've tried it all. I've done everything the world has to offer. What else could there be? Where can I find contentment? Verse 13, I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. All right, here's the great turnaround. We're starting to see it. We're starting to see Solomon's mindset change. He starts to stop, to consider the roses, to smell the roses. He's got it right there in front of his face, and we're starting to see this transition. He's no longer approaching this like a wild man, throwing himself at things. He's trying to use the wisdom that God has given to him. Verse 14, the wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not long be remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the wise, the fool too must die. He says it doesn't make a whole lot of difference in the end if both of them come to the same fate. Having wisdom, just wisdom, isn't enough. No matter how carefully you pursue these things, how carefully you pursue life and pleasure, you will end in the darkness and the dust of death. The fool and the wise man are both forgotten. They've done meaningless works. I'm sure all of you, if I were to ask, knew someone who was very wise and yet did not know God. There are some of us who have these incredible people in our lives, but at the end of the day, their impact was nothing because they were not doing it for the right reasons. But then we see this miraculous reaction here in verse 17 and following. So I hated life because the work that it has done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be a wise or foolish person. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all of my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. So he's starting to get down, he's starting to get depressed, which he already was, but he's like, why am I doing all this? None of this makes any sense. I'm doing all this work, I'm busting my hump here, but I just have to give it to the next guy when I kick the bucket. This isn't right, this isn't fair. And then he sinks into anguish, and he starts to give his heart up to despair. And he's starting to really question why? Why? Verse 22, what do people get for all the toil and the anxious striving which they labor for under the sun? All their days, their work is grief and pain. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. Is there no answer? Is it all hopelessness? We've read however many verses to this point, and we haven't found an answer yet. But we're going to. Here it comes. Put a relationship with God into that picture, and everything changes. Verse 24, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without Him, who can eat or find enjoyment? Boom! There it is! We're finally here! This is the true message and meaning of this book. This is it. We're going to continue with this. We're going to finish off chapter 2 in the weeks to come. But this is it. I'm stopping here. I want to leave you on a cliffhanger. I want you to think, what on earth is Solomon going to do? When you have the answers in the palm of your hand. I don't know where you've been. I don't know what it is that you have going on this week. But I know that we so oftentimes get wrapped up in the wrong stuff, guys. That we think that we know what is best for us, and we really don't. I've had people ask me before, Taylor, do you really think God has something for everyone? I do. I really do. I think God has placed a calling upon your life. You will not be on this earth a moment longer than you are supposed to be. Until that point, you have a purpose. There is something for you to do that God has just for you. If you can't see that yet, pray for it. Ask for it, and you will receive. There is a time, there is a place to have enjoyment. There is a time, there is a place to find satisfaction in what you do. But church family, at the end of the day, we're here for one purpose and one purpose alone, and that is to come to know God and to glorify Him. If you're not doing that, if that's not your goal in life in this moment, whenever it is that you are listening, why are you here? What have you done with your life to this point? What has been your life's pursuit? If it's not God, if it's not Him, if it's not glorifying His name and furthering His kingdom, I think you've got some decisions to make. And maybe now is the time to make those decisions. Let me pray for you, and we'll bring this to a close. Father, we thank you for today and for all the things that you've provided for us, for allowing us a time to enjoy the fruits of our labor, to be able to work, to be able to have fun and to laugh and to have friends and to do these things. But Father, ultimately we know that that's not why we're here. We're here to love you, to seek you, and to show others who you are. Provide us these opportunities. Illuminate the path before us. Lord, we love you and we thank you. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.